Hello and welcome to another episode of Mind Wipe, the episode of Casting Views where I get a podcaster and, well, wipe their mind. So this week I'm really happy because I've got a brand new voice on the show. I have got Raging Rich from the Middle-aged Bodcast. So hi Rich, how you doing?
I'm doing really well, thanks Dan. How are you?
I'm very good. It's always nice when I get new people come along and willing to be subjected to a mind wipe. But before we get into it, let's talk a little bit about yourself and your podcast. So, firstly, brilliant name for it, the Middle-aged Podcast. And I think you've just wrapped up your first season, haven't you?
We have, yes. We've just finished our first 10 episodes, and today actually released our bonus episode that's all about my co host's debut novel that he's releasing. So, we're about to go into our second season and just see how that goes, really.
Well, I've got a lot to say on some of those things you said there, but do you just want to give a little overview, sort of like the sales pitch for what your podcast is?
Yeah, no problem. So, Middle-aged Bodcast, it's two 40 plus best mates from Birmingham trying to improve health, fitness, trying to get better at DIY and cooking as well, which is a lot of fun. And we're also talking a lot about creative projects and success stories. So, we've had a few guests on the show in the last few weeks talking about different life achievements and things like that. And then we're kind of talking about the progress we've been making, having a bit of a weekly weigh-in, trying to make it a bit of fun. There has been the odd time the weight's gone up instead of going down because we've been going to the takeaway a bit too much, but we are trying to make it into a little bit more of a proper, not so much of a challenge now, but more of just us both supporting each other into making sure that we're getting better and we're just improving our health and fitness, really.
That's a perfect podcast because I am in the same age bracket as you. And it's when you said at the start about the DIY, I'm thinking, well, yeah, I'm one of those people that have got to this age where I can put a flat pack together, sorry, after the trip to IKEA, but anything other than that, and I'm out my depth,
Well, my co-host T.A. Shalano, he actually has said a few times that between the two of us, we've probably got a little bit of minor DIY skill. But there's a story on one of our episodes where he does mention actually that my dad was supervising us trying to move a shed in my garden. It's a very long story as to why we had to move the shed. It was slightly hanging over the edge a little bit, and we had to cut a bit down and move it. But we had six of us trying to move this shed, and my dad just looking at us all, going, "Hang on, I'm twice the age of you lot." And this is when we were in our 30s as well. And he was just sort of looking at us all, going, "I've never been so disappointed." Or me and my brother were there as well doing it. So he's just looking at me and my brother, going, "I got you, pair. I got all your mates." And you're just all hopeless. And I think by the end, he just gave up.
It is a funny thing, isn't it? Like the older generation just knew it all. Maybe are we the Google generation? Sorry, not Google, the YouTube generation. So if we need to do something, it's like, oh yeah, we'll just look a video up on YouTube. Someone's bound to have put it. I wonder if there's a little bit of that.
I think there is, to be fair. I've been doing a lot since we started the podcast. I've become kind of the tech guy, and TA is more the one who writes the questions. And he's sort of been doing a lot about, he released a book this weekend, his first novel. And so he's been gaining a lot of knowledge on sort of promoting that and how he could get sales and how he can sort of improve his writing through YouTube. And certainly I've been doing the same, trying to improve how to do my website stuff and how to get a little bit more traction on the podcasting, because we didn't know. We were happy if we had like 2 listeners, and we tend to get a steady stream, which is good. And all of it's just lots of research and YouTubing and just sort of looking on the internet to try and find out more and more about things. But certainly with a DIY, I've found a few tips on YouTube.
And how have you found your first season? Because like I said you're 10 episodes in plus a bonus episode. How have you found your first season in podcasting?
It's really random. I actually used to host a podcast very briefly about 10 or 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
It was on sort of wrestling content, and I only did it for a short while. That was a lot of fun, but it was obviously before all these resources were available, like Spotify and Apple for podcasts. And so it was a big learning curve again when we started up. And the big thing that I've found was just how do we get started, really? Do you need lots of microphones? I see a lot of these sort of YouTube podcasts when you've got like I listen to Michael Rosenbaum's his podcast quite a lot. So Lex Luthor from Smallville, and I see him with his setup and everything, and I was going, "Oh, we're going to need all of this." And we started reading, we started looking stuff up, and we realised actually you can do it quite easily on a budget, and it's a really good way of getting your voice out there. And we found the things that we've been talking about has obviously been quite a mix. We've had mental health, physical health, career success, with all of our guests, and that's been fantastic. We did our first virtual interview a few weeks ago for our 9th episode, and then we've got a few more planned for our second season. So we're just seeing how it goes, but we've had a lot of fun with it. It's been a really great community that we've interacted with, and just looking to see what's next, really, and if we can keep the fun going, really, and hopefully lose a little bit more weight and actually get that fitness level up without as many takeaways as we've been having.
It's a really good idea, I think, for a podcast. And if you can benefit, if that's what you're after as well, if you can benefit from it, and I'm sure that's a motivation as well to help yourself, right? It's a win-win there, right? So you're getting some great output out there as well as taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, we've added a few little challenges in there over the course of the weeks. So there was a lot about the cooking, and I'm really not a great chef. I don't like cooking that much unless I'm cooking for other people. And so I've been doing a little bit more. Actually, TA told me some random idea of his. Well, he was talking about making a completely different recipe, and he talked about putting a stock cube in it. And I made a chicken tikka masala in my slow cooker the other week. And I thought,
Nice.
I'm just going to do it and check it out. And if it
Yeah.
works, great. And it's the best one I've done. So there are some benefits coming from it.
The cookbook out soon.
I don't know about that.
And yeah, about that, because I saw your bonus episode today. So I've had a few people on it now who've written a book, and I'm just like sitting. I don't even know how you go about that. So I know he's not here, and but do you just want to explain or talk about the book that your co-host has written?
Yeah. So the co-host of the Middle-aged Bodcast, T.A. Shalano, he during lockdown just started writing this book. I think he'd always wanted to do it, but he'd never really spoken about it. And just prior to lockdown, he hadn't told anybody that he knew. He went to a writer's retreat in Birmingham, where you go and you get tips on your writing, and you can just go and write pages upon pages of it. And then they have little breakouts where they all meet up and talk about what they've been working on. He didn't say anything about it. And then we got into lockdown, and he started just talking about this book that he'd written. I don't know. That's quite a surprising thing to hear about, and a really good creative project. When he then told me some of the concepts of it, I thought that's really not the kind of thing I imagined you writing. So it's a story about these two siblings, and they essentially find out that their father. There's a bit of a spoiler here, but he passes away at the start of the book, and they make this discovery then that he has been working on hybrid human robots.
Okay.
And there's then this big storyline of obviously them trying to find out what their dad's been up to and why he was working on this project. And then you've got other people from other factions and things trying to find out what this is all about and getting control of these robots and where are they actually stored. And it just becomes this really fast-paced sort of thriller novel. It's got a little bit of a sci-fi element to it, but he's not a big fan of sci-fi. So it's not really that deep on the sci-fi element, but on terms of the sort of the thriller and the fast-paced stuff going on, it's absolutely fantastic. He's my best mate, and I know I'm kind of obliged to say it, but it has been really good. I read it a little while ago, and he's been doing really well with it. It launched on the 12th of October, and it's available now on his website, shalanobooks.co.uk.
Yeah, I'll stick a link in as well. It's called The Doctor's Hidden Patients, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
As well. I like it. I think it's fantastic when people can write that, because we all think we've got a story in us, but it's about getting that out and into however many pages, right?
Well, he's writing his second one now.
Already, blimey.
Yeah,
Blimey.
he's straight away got into doing a second one. So when he's not podcasting with me, he's off writing his second novel at the moment. It's not a complete connection to his previous one. I think he's put in a little bit of a link in some respects, but it's not a complete sequel.
So we are going to start wiping your mind now. So I briefed you beforehand. So what it is, it's just for me, it's a great way of just getting to chat to people, but it's also a great way of finding out a little bit about kind of what makes people tick. So the aim is they don't necessarily have to be your most favorite examples of these, but just 1 to 3 items from a number of categories of things you'd love to relive for the first time again, and potentially why. So I've got an order here, but I tend to randomly go around it. So let's start with the good old start for me is TV shows. So what TV shows would you love to kind of forget about and relive for the first time?
So I've got two of them. The first one is the UK version of The Office.
Okay. Yeah.
And this was a really strange one for me because I didn't see it when it first aired. And it was actually TA who got me into it when we first sort of met many years ago now, 20 odd years ago. We'd go to the pub on a weekend, and this one night he just started talking about The Office. He started doing the Ricky Gervais dance from the episode in the second series, and he'd be talking about it, and I'd be going, okay, this sounds kind of like it's up my street. It's my kind of
Yeah.
thing, and I just couldn't find it anywhere. Everywhere I was sort of going, trying to find it, and then randomly the BBC re-aired the entire series before the Christmas specials were coming out, and I just caught the entire thing then. So watched that from episode 1 and just got absolutely hooked to it. I think David Brent, it's so cringe-inducing watching him, and yet you can't help but laugh. We actually got told off by TA's wife, Mrs. Shalano, because a couple of years ago we just started watching a few episodes, and me and TA can actually quote certain episodes, especially the the one when they do the staff training and he gets the guitar out.
Yes. Yeah.
So we started just quoting it and got told off, and she just said, never watching this with you two again.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So digress a bit. Have you watched the American version as well?
I've not. TA has. I tried to get into it a little bit. I think when it first started, it borrowed a fair bit from the British one, didn't it? And I think that kind of put me off a little bit, and I never went on to the American one fully then. But I have heard it's really good, especially once it's sort of becomes its own thing rather than taking on a lot of the stuff from the British version. So I do need to give it a go.
Yeah, I think the first episode is pretty much not scene for scene, but pretty much it. And then it becomes its own thing. And they are very different shows because I think going back to the British one, well, the American one is very obviously sitcom-y, got 12 seasons. Or no, 9 seasons, I think. Whereas the British one was 12 episodes, right? But the British one, it's more of like a sadness about it, isn't it? It's a comedy, but like you said, he hits the nail on the head with that proper cringiness. And there is that element of sadness when you're watching it. I think, do you get what I mean? Sympathy
Yeah.
for him. Yeah.
You kind of end up rooting for him by the end, I find, especially in that Christmas special when he starts going on those dates and he obviously tells his best mate where to go and he makes a joke about one of them that he likes. And it's a really interesting arc that he has because he kind of goes from being the butt of the joke to everybody. And then by the end, you just feel like, good on you. He's finally sort of won all of his colleagues over, or his ex-colleagues, obviously, by that point. But I do find that arc is really good. You've obviously got Tim and Dawn as well, and their storyline going throughout all of the episodes. And there's always something quotable. I mean, sometimes we'll just be like having a chat, and once you prove your point, you'll just go, "That's blockbusters." And one person will get it. It's usually me or TA or his wife. And then the rest of our friends are just looking at us kind of in bewilderment. But it's always good, those little in-jokes that like the odd person gets from those sort of shows.
Yeah, Britain did quite a lot of humour like that at the time or in and around it. So did you ever get into Alan Partridge?
Randomly enough, I've never really gotten into it. It's something everyone always says is such a great show. And I'm really bad with my comedies. I kind of never discover them when they're out. I tend to discover them as they're finishing or they've been gone years by. And obviously now I think there's so much content out there now.
Yeah.
I just struggle to find half the stuff. I've been recommended so many things and I kind of half watch them and I never continue them on. And I do need to get it's one of those things I should have tried watching in lockdown. Really, I think I probably would have gotten into it a lot more.
No, I got into it fairly late. I mean, there is an advantage to getting into things once they're finished, is you've got it all there waiting for you rather than waiting. But yeah, I was recommended, and not exactly the same, but it draws similar vibes to me about him as a character who thinks more of himself than others, I think of him and the situations. But yeah, maybe when you come on in a year or two, you can you can put that one up. I think that's a great start. I think the office, the UK office, is a really solid start. What's your next one?
My next one is Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Wow, I say wow because a blast from the past that I've not had on here yet again either.
Like a few people, I probably watched the film first, which is very different to the show. And I mentioned before I used to do a wrestling podcast. I'm obviously a wrestling fan, not so much now as I used to be, but when I was still living at my parents and I was in college, I remember just watching the wrestling on a Saturday when it used to be on Sky One, and they'd have like their little 1 hour clip show sort of going on. And when it finished, the announcer went, right, coming up next, we've got a show called Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I went, oh, I've seen the film of that. And I'm pretty sure the announcer actually says, now, if you've seen the film, it's not the same. And I thought, okay, so I'll give that a go. Just watched the first episode and just got hooked straight away. I'd seen Sarah Michelle Gellar on something years before. So I recognised her from that. And obviously Anthony Head, everyone recognises from the Nescafé Gold Blend advert.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really got into it. I think once you've watched a few episodes of it and it sort of gets into the proper sense of what the show became, where it is that one girl whose entire mission is just to rid the world of all these vampires and the different demons and things, it really does become something that's got a great lore to it. And obviously they added Angel into it, and later on Spike, who's one of the best characters, I think.
Yeah.
It just became can't miss TV for me, really. And it actually got to the point when the show was ending, there was a karaoke night. I'm a big karaokeer, unfortunately, for my sins. I wouldn't leave my house until Buffy had finished. All my mates would be going, and I'd rock up an hour later. I'd be, I've got to watch Buffy. I've got to make sure I watch Buffy first. So yeah, I really got into that as the show went on. I think so many great actors in it as well, even the ones who only appeared in the odd episode. I think Eliza Dushku as Faith is one of my favourite characters in it, especially the sort of like she has parallels to Buffy, but she also has a lot of differences to Buffy. She has that darker side where she hasn't had that family life that Buffy had, and yet she comes out of it at the other end by the end of the show and redeems herself. And I just find that whole arc as well a really good one. The whole thing about it, really, when you get to sort of those later episodes and you realise how far the characters have come. Obviously, you have, Willow, who's very geeky and very bookish at the start, and by the end, she's this really powerful witch who obviously creates all these other slayers and stuff. So it's such a great concept, I think, of how characters can grow and evolve over time.
There wasn't anything quite like it, I think, on it. British TV, at least, anyway, at the time it came out. It was very different. Yeah, I've not seen the film, but where it's very different. But yeah, my introduction to this was, so I met my wife, who obviously was a girlfriend at the time. She really liked it. So, to try win favour, I bought here we go, this is going back some kids, VHS box sets of the series, right? And because I bought those for her, then I would then end up borrowing them and watching them. And yeah, I just became addicted to it. I think, like you said, it was, especially the early seasons, there was a lot of tongue in cheek. There's a lot of humour, sort of the good effects for TV at the time. I'm not going to say they're going to wow people now. But yeah, like you said, the characters. So like Spike, who starts off as a villain, but you over time start to get to like him as one of the, what he becomes kind of one of the good guys then, doesn't he? And it's how they change your perception of some of the characters, and some of the storylines that they did were just, it was just great TV, right?
I love the fact that they've done a musical episode, and they've also done an episode where there is no dialogue whatsoever, and yet it's this really involved episode that's quite gripping, with like villains in it that are quite scary, and you sort
I was going to say, yeah,
it's so well done at times. It's just for me, one of the best TV shows that's ever been made.
If you say Buffy to me, my mind goes straight away to that silent episode and those villains in that. It's just iconic, right? And maybe not the first, but I'm sure it was one of the first series to do a musical episode.
I think so. Yeah, I don't remember it being quite prevalent until that happened, and then all of a sudden everybody was doing it.
Yeah. I think two great shows there. Yeah, and very different as well in tone.
I've tried to make it a bit of a broader sense of different things because you will find out when we get to some of the other ones a little bit of a pattern that emerges.
Okay, we'll try to spot that. So you said it was just the two, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's move on to we'll do the close relation of TV shows. So we'll do the movies.
Okay, so I have got 3 for the films.
Okay.
2 of them are superhero films, which is where you'll start to see a bit of a common thread in a lot of the things that I like. But I do have another film as well. And that first film is Speed. So the first time I ever saw Speed, you know, when you were at school and it was the end of term and you'd have a lesson and rather than having a lesson, they'd wheel in a VCR with a TV, you know, the combi ones, and they'd put a film on. And so someone in my class went, "Oh, well, I could bring Speed in," because we were all too young to watch it at the time. Not massively, but I think we were a year or two younger than we were supposed to watch it. But they wheel it in, and of course you only see the first hour and a bit. You can't actually see the rest of the film. So they play the film from the start, and I don't actually remember a lot of the start from that time, because what happened was they obviously turn it off at the end of the lesson, so it's halfway through. I don't understand how this happened, but every time I would see it after that, it was always from the bit I'd never seen. So for about 3 or 4 years, I'd seen the whole film, but I'd never seen it all in one go. So every time it was on TV, it'd be either the bit where it jumps the bit of the road that's missing.
Yeah.
Or it would be when Keanu Reeves goes under the bus on that little contraption. It's always been that little bit that I'd end up seeing, and I'd be going, well, I've never seen this film in full. And then as the years went on and I met TA, it turned out he'd managed to see it at the cinema when it came out. Again, too young to actually have gone and watched it, but he managed to get in and see it. And he always would say, well, I have seen it on the cinema. And I'd always be a bit jealous of that because I think it's such a great action film. And then we actually, where I work has a theatre attached to it, and they did show it for the 25th anniversary. I did ask them if they would do a showing on there on this big screen. So they did show it. And hilariously, it was me, TA, and Mrs. Shalano. The last time that we had seen the film around their house, again, me and TA quoted the whole thing and got told off. So when we went to watch it on the big screen,
a theme there.
Well, when we watched it on the big screen, Mrs. Shalano actually did turn around to us and say, "We're the only people that have come to see this here. I do not want you talking all the way through it." And so we had to kind of be quiet and just let her enjoy it. And then for the 30th anniversary this year, it was actually at the cinema proper. So TA and I went to watch that, and there was a good batch of people going to watch it. It was quite popular. So that was brilliant. And Keanu Reeves is randomly like one of my favourite actors. I always say he's got about 8 good films, and then everything else he's in is rubbish, because there's certain films where he's trying, and then there's certain films where he's just Neo from the Matrix every single time. But I think he's brilliant. Like some of the films that he's done over the years. And the first thing I ever saw him in was Bill and Ted, and then obviously after those it was Speed. So very different sort of things that he was in. But after that, it was the time when I loved all my action films as well, when Speed came out. So it's just that whole bit when they're on the bus. I think that's absolutely fantastic. That whole sequence when they're on the bus, and all the little bits in between where the rest of his team are trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, just looking at it, 94. Have you seen the sequel?
I haven't.
No, I haven't either. I'm not sure I want to.
I've tried to avoid it. A lot of people told me it wasn't very good. And I think the fact that Keanu didn't do it kind of told me what I needed to know about it. I've seen clips of it, and the one thing that I saw that put me off, before he gets on the bus in the first one and he steals that car from the guy who steals the car from is in the second one. And he's not only in the second one, they give him a name. And I went, well, hang on, you've now taken this character who's in this one little scene that's completely random and turned him into a character in the film. It's all a little bit
Yeah.
much for me. So yeah, I've avoided it as best as I can. Although I have heard they want to make another one with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock in it. So I'm just hoping they ignore the second one and make a proper sequel.
No, the first one's great, and like I said, it just came out at a time. I keep saying it's probably nostalgia more than anything, but I think the late 80s, the early 90s, or even mid 90s, those summer blockbusters felt like they were summer blockbusters, right? They were
Yeah.
destination films. You would go to the cinema and you'd just be entranced by them. Now, whether it's probably something we're going to come on to, whether it's CGI and all the effects have kind of blown those out the water, I don't know. But no, that is a solid first choice there. So I've written that down. So what's your next choice?
So I have two superhero films up next, and the first one is The Dark Knight. This is actually the film that I've seen the most at the cinema.
Really?
So I saw it when it first came out twice. And then when The Dark Knight Rises came out, they actually showed Batman Begins and The Dark Knight again in the same week. I couldn't get to see Batman Begins, unfortunately, I was working, but The Dark Knight was shown a little bit later, so I went to watch it again. And then a few years ago, they actually did in Birmingham a Joker versus Joker night at one of the big cinema screens that was there. It's not there anymore, which is a shame. But they did the Tim Burton movie, and then as soon as that finished, they played The Dark Knight. It's just one of those films. I think even if it wasn't a Batman film, if you took away the fact that it's comic book and superhero, it's just an amazing film. TA has this thing about that trilogy. We did a bit of a film challenge a few years ago where he set me some films to watch. I set him the Dark Knight trilogy. His take on it is Batman Begins is I want to be Batman. The Dark Knight is I am Batman. And The Dark Knight Rises is I used to be Batman. I want to be Batman again, which I always take a little bit of an insult from that, really. But the second film, The Dark Knight, I absolutely love it. I think that Heath Ledger is just absolutely phenomenal as the Joker. I remember when the trailer came out and I saw the trailer for the first time and just thought, this guy is going to just be the best version of the Joker we've ever seen. I think the whole sort of story, the continuation of that first film and sort of everything that builds up and the way that it ends as well, on that sort of twist of Batman kind of saying, actually, no, I'm going to take the blame for all these things that have happened because we can't let Gotham's White Knight, as he calls Harvey Dent, we can't let him and all that stuff about him go away. He was building up the city into becoming something better again. And it's such a phenomenal movie. And it's such a shame with Heath Ledger not being able, obviously, to continue. But I do think it also has the best opening in probably any film that I've seen. That scene when they walk into the bank and you've got all the people with the Joker masks on, and obviously at the end when he takes the mask off and it's actually the Joker underneath. I just that is so well done.
So I think I've said it a few times on here. So Batman is my favourite comic book character, superhero character. And that trilogy of films for me is, not necessarily going to say the perfect sort of superhero trilogy, but they're as good as damn it as you're going to get. I think, especially that second film just kind of ups the ante, doesn't it? And like you said, the performance from both, sort of Bale and especially Ledger. I know people talk about it a lot, but it was just so good, wasn't it? It was just so good to see that on the screen, that kind of portrayal of the Joker. And I'm not sure. I don't think I saw either of the first two at the cinema. I did see the third one at the cinema, and I know that's got its detractors, but yeah, I think put them together as a trilogy. Yeah, I love them.
Yeah, I think they're phenomenal movies as a trilogy and individually as well. Actually, yeah, that second film for me just creates the perfect balance between the other two as well, and to see where it starts with that first film and sort of the origin and where it ends up going, it's a fantastic trilogy.
And the fact that we haven't had really a good one since.
Yeah, the Pattinson one was okay. It was a little bit too long. I think he was a good Batman, but there's a few things with it. It probably could have cut a good hour out of it.
Okay, so what's your final choice in movies?
It's another superhero one. There is a little bit of a sort of story to this one, and it's Spider-Man: No Way Home.
Okay, good film. I like it.
And the reason I'd want my mind wiped of it is I actually, the day before I went to see it, got it spoiled for me. And so I'd been watching some YouTube videos. There was a few channels that sort of spoke about superhero films. It's my own fault. I mean, I should have known better really to avoid them. And because I'd been watching them, the YouTube algorithm decided to just pop up a video as soon as my YouTube loaded up. No Way Home, Andrew Garfield. And you can literally tell as soon as you see the thumbnail, that's legitimate. It's not somebody who's done a fake clip or anything like that. And of course, the minute you see, oh, he's in it, the next thought's going to be, well, Tobey Maguire's obviously going to be doing it as well. So yeah, it's a shame really, but still really enjoyed the film. I did not tell my brother anything about it. I think it's one of those films as well that, much like The Dark Knight, it kind of goes in directions you don't expect. I think with the MCU version of Spider-Man, they did this. He's already Spider-Man, and his origin's a little bit different to everything we know, and we
Mm.
never truly see it. And then when they get through this film, and obviously Aunt May does the "with great power comes great responsibility" line instead of Uncle Ben, and he has that chat with the other Spider-Men, and then by the end, he kind of becomes the proper Spider-Man, like how the other
Yeah.
versions are. And I really like how that went, and it kind of took the character into that version everybody knows and everybody loves, and gave sort of then an opportunity to have a slightly more grown-up version of Spider-Man, but still with that kind of basis of what the character is at the core of him.
Yeah, I just like the Tom Holland series because they just have fun with the character, don't they? It's and that really comes across. And sometimes in the past, I mean, we were just talking about the Dark Knight trilogy, but some that is serious one. But sometimes they can get a little bit too melodramatic. Whereas these ones, they just seem to have a lot of fun with the character, right? And yeah, it just shines through. So look, it's not a great reason why you want to wipe your mind of it, because it's bored, but I think it's a great reason to have it. I mean, yeah, that we've not had anything like that. And yeah, spoilers these days, it's just terrible, isn't it?
It's just proof that you shouldn't watch things like YouTube when a big film's coming out you're excited about. Just avoid it. Look up cooking videos instead.
Yeah, cooking videos, yeah. Well, they'll probably pop up in one of those, you never know.
Maybe, to be fair.
Right. Let's jump to something different. Let's go to books.
So I'm a little bit hit and miss with my books, if I'm being 100% honest. When I'm trying to do fiction books, I really struggle with them. I tend to read a lot more autobiographies or graphic novels if I'm reading sort of the fiction side of things. I think for me, the first one that I would pick, I would really love to be able to say The Doctor's Hidden Patients for TA, but I don't think I can get away with that one. But I think for me, if I was to pick one book and one graphic novel, I think the graphic novel I would pick is the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I actually have, I don't think it's an original printing of it, but I have a version of it from many, many years ago when the Turtles sort of first came around. And just comparing it even to that first film that they did in 1990, it's very close in sort of the story, and it's quite gritty and dark. It's very different to what the cartoon was at the time as well, growing up. I just find it a really great story in terms of their origin and kind of the things, again, that they go through. You have this whole thing about family, and yet it's not a family in the sort of traditional sense. It's kind of an adopted family of
Mm.
Splinter taking the turtles in, and sort of obviously training them to become ninjas is a little bit different to the thing a normal family would do. But it's that kind of feeling of, there's that thread running at the same time with the Foot Clan and everything, with the Shredder and him kind of taking that something that was actually quite honourable and turning it into something dishonourable, and then the turtles fighting to take that back. And what I really liked about it as well was the fact that it was this independent comic. It was something that when it first came out, it wasn't actually a mainstream thing. It just caught on, and it actually led to this big phenomenon. Obviously, I was a kid at the time the Turtles came out, so I watched the original cartoons and things like that. And that was kind of my entry to them. But I think you see now, when you see all of the reboots and the different films and the different comic book versions that they do, they're never the same as that first one. And I
Mm.
think that first one, because it's that original property and it's that first time of doing it, it's just such a great story, and it kind of goes a little bit deeper than the first film as well. It introduces April O'Neil a little bit later than it does in sort of the film and things, and it introduces Baxter Stockman and a few other characters. But I do really love that sort of story. It's probably as well the first. When I was a kid, I got comics, but they're always quite childish things. So obviously, you start off with a Beano and the Dandy, and then you move into sort of, you get turtles and superheroes, but even sort of Batman, it was very much like the Adam West Batman still. The comics were sort
Yeah.
of in that style. And then when Turtles came out, everything kind of grew up a little bit. And that's just something that I think now as an adult, if I was to read it for the first time, I think that would be something that just would resonate a lot more with me.
Great choice. Great choice. Favorite turtle?
Michelangelo.
Yeah. There we go. That was the same with me. That was the same with me. Yeah, again, different there. Not had that before. So, what was the other book you had mentioned?
So I read autobiographies quite a fair bit, and I kind of try to. It's really bad actually, because I haven't finished reading this book in particular. I started reading Christopher Reeve's autobiography, and as I said, big fan of superheroes, especially Superman. It's the first superhero I ever found out about when I was a kid, and it's a great book, but I never got to the bit about Superman because I found it quite hard to read at the time. I had an uncle who'd had an accident around the time that I was reading it, who ended up in a wheelchair as well. So there was sort of a kind of a parallel in my family life of what had sort of happened. And although my uncle uh, didn't have as severe an injury as Christopher Reeve, it was still quite severe, and it was hard for me to read some of that portion of the book. But it was a really good story of strength and overcoming adversity and sort of the things that he was going through at the time. And you do find there's a lot of really good stories that he tells about starting to become Superman and things like that, which was interesting. But I could just never finish it. I found it quite hard. At one point, it got a little bit deep and quite dark in some places, and surprisingly so. But from what I've read, it does get a little bit more sort of light-hearted again, and a little bit more about his life pre his accident, which was something I was really interested in finding out about. Certainly, as I say, from the Superman side of things, learning more about that. It's an interesting one because, as I say, I never finished it, and I feel like to go back to it's quite hard. I'm not great at reading at the moment. I tend to read when I'm on public transport going to work, which is not always the easiest thing to do, especially with sort of autobiographies. I find them quite hard to read when I'm traveling to work. So maybe I need an audiobook version of it or something that might make it a little bit easier. But it's an interesting one just because I think the bits I have read about Superman from sort of little snippets and things where he talks about Richard Donner would have shut down parts of New York if he was filming Superman 4, and yet they actually filmed the UN building at Milton Keynes train station, for example, and things like that. And there's lots of things I think leading up to his accident that's in that early part of the book, and you do sort of go, wow, this is not really what I expected. Obviously I knew it was going to be in there, but I kind of felt it would be his life kind of from the beginning to leading up to everything, as you'd sort of expect with a lot of these other books that are out there, but it's kind of jumps around a lot on the times. And I found that quite difficult, which is why I sort of stopped reading as well.
It's not a book or a story I've gone too much into, but yeah, it was just going back to your point. Yeah, audio books seems a lot of people say that to me because I find with work or between work and podcasting, I tend to not have too much time to read. So yeah. But no, that'd be an interesting one. Kind of look at time because I want to make sure we get through all the topics for you. I just end up love talking about these things. So
you can cut out the Christopher Reeve book if you want.
No,
I do not mind at all.
No, let's jump over to albums/artists. So yeah, it's either a band or a particular album that resonates with you?
I think for me, the album has to be Everything Must Go by the Manic Street Preachers.
Okay, what a choice.
Came out in 1996. So I was in secondary school. I just remember hearing it a lot in the summer and it being really nice weather. And I just don't know why. I always equate that album randomly with this really nice weather. I actually have seen the Manic Street Preachers a few times live as well. And I actually saw them perform the album in full as well for
Okay,
the
that's
20th
cool.
anniversary. So that was a fantastic experience. It's strange when you hear Design for Life as the second track being performed live because they obviously always end with it normally. But it's one of those albums that's just, I don't think there's a bad song on it. I think it's that transitional stage from Richie Edwards leaving and then obviously then becoming a trio. The sound changes a little bit, but it's not as dramatic maybe as later on down the line with them. But pretty much every song on it's just single quality. There's not really much of a filler on it, and if there is, it's still a really great track as well. I actually had all of the CD singles as well when they came out, and foolishly sold them all off when everything went digital. I wish I'd kept them. I've kept the albums, but I haven't got the singles anymore. So I just think start to finish, you've got obviously Elvis Impersonator at the start, and it just goes through then to Design for Life and Kevin Carter. And as it goes through each track, I'm just thinking it builds and builds these really anthemic songs that come through. Obviously, at the end, when you get to No Surface All Feeling and you've got that solo at the end, you've got the guitar solo on it, you've got the drum solo coming through. It's just absolutely phenomenal album and just reminds me of, again, just summertime for some reason. I don't really think it's really something people
No, but
equate with
music does
summertime.
that. Music does that. It will resonate with something in your memory. It doesn't matter if
Yeah,
it's not a summer album. If that's what it means to you, that's what it means to you.
it certainly brings that about a fair bit for me.
I mentioned them in an episode. I don't know if it's going to have come out before this one or not, but it's not that I didn't like them, but I was never a fan of them. That I just never really listened to their stuff. But I was able to go to the Oasis Nebworth concert, and they supported them. And hearing them live, they were just something else, and that was it. I came away thinking, yeah, I bloody respect them because the way they performed, the way they sounded, it was just incredible.
They are phenomenal. I saw them in 2019 was the last time I saw them, and they headlined a Splendor Festival in Nottingham, and they're just absolutely phenomenal. Like they're still going after all these years, still strong vocally, still strong on the performance aspects. I think they're an absolutely fantastic band.
Okay, cool. What else do you have under this category?
The other one is the Bad Album by Michael Jackson.
Okay.
So when I was a kid, my cousin actually taped his vinyl record of Bad for me, and I don't know how I didn't wear the tape out, if I'm honest, because I just used to listen to it all the time. It's another album where I just don't think there's a bad song on it at all. Pardon the pun. But yeah, it's just one of those that, again, lots and lots of singles that could be released. Those that weren't probably had the quality to be singles. I remember he did the film Moonwalker as well around that time, and so a lot of those songs are on that album. That album sort of feature on that film. But then, sort of years later, I've been to see Thriller live a few times in Birmingham, and every time I see it, they actually do Smooth Criminal, and they do the whole video. They recreate the whole video on
Oh,
stage,
really?
and it's such a great song, and it's actually the first CD single, not CD, sorry, the first vinyl single that I had actually way back when, and it just brings back these memories of this album that's just. Everyone always says Thriller's his best album, but I think Bad is his best album. There are songs on Thriller that I don't listen to and I'll skip, but I would play Bad all the time, start to finish, never skip anything. My only complaint about the album was on the vinyl record that my cousin recorded. Leave Me Alone's not on the vinyl, it's only on the CD. So for years,
Oh,
I didn't have a
really?
copy of Leave Me Alone.
This resonates with me so bad. I think if you're of a certain generation, you either had that album in your house or you knew somebody that had it. It was everywhere, wasn't it? And I think, yeah, I remember it was probably one of the first albums I recall being able to memorize and sing most of the words to most of the songs on. I mean, like you said, Man in the Mirror, Dirty Diana, Bad. Yeah, it was just, it was the album, wasn't it? And I agree with you. For me, I don't know if it's a slight age thing, but for me, it was Bad rather than Thriller.
I think so, yeah. I don't know. I love Thriller. I think it's a great album, and maybe Thriller is that one where a lot of people hadn't heard that kind of sound before. But for me, I just think Bad doesn't. There's just not a bad track on it, as I say, and I keep saying it like that, and it's like I'm making a pun, but I'm not. I think every track on it could be a single that he could have released at the time.
And the video to Bad as well, that was quite iconic at the time as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I always remember the version in Moonwalker, to be fair, because I think that's the first time I saw the video in full, where he has the kids portraying all the different roles. But a few years ago, they actually showed the original Bad video, and it's about 20 minutes long. It's got like this weird spoken part at the beginning, and I think Wesley Snipes is in it as well. It's like he comes from this sort of privileged background, Michael Jackson, and he sort of started off in this gang, and he goes away and he goes and gets his education. He comes back and he sort of goes and meets up with his old gang, and they're like, "You're not bad anymore," and he's like, "Okay, I'll show you bad," and then he does the song. But the song's probably about 4 minutes long, and the rest of the sort of 17 or 18 minutes before it is just
Short
this
film.
story that they do. It's mad.
Oh, brilliant. That was the 80s, wasn't it? So
100%.
Did you have another one under albums or?
No.
Okay, right. Let's jump to sporting events. Now, I said to you, you don't, or I hope I said to you, you don't have had to either been in these sporting events or had to even have been there. It could be something that's been on TV or something. But yeah, sporting events.
I have one that I went to, and it's really random. So even though I'm from Birmingham, I am a supporter of Liverpool. It's a really strange thing. I don't fully know why. I think it's the first footballers I remember were John Barnes and Ian Rush on the telly advertising stuff. So I've always sort of had this affinity for Liverpool, and I actually went to watch. So I'd never seen them play at Anfield. I always used to have to go to Villa Park or to the Molineux, sit in the home end, and sort of sit on my hands. I couldn't actually cheer any goals or anything like that. I actually went to an FA Cup game. My current favourite player is Mohamed Salah. And I went to an FA Cup game at the Molineux, and he was a sub, and I couldn't cheer him or anything. And he went to come on, and I went to get up, and they went, "Rich, remember where you are. You can't cheer him coming on." And then Liverpool scored an equaliser, and Klopp sort of said, "Oh, sit back down." So until Wolves scored their next goal, I had to wait to see him. I think I seen him grand total in the 2 games I've seen him playing for about 10 minutes. But I did go to Anfield for a game. I went to a pre-season friendly many years ago. Obviously, living in Birmingham, it's hard to get tickets, and sometimes I have to work on sort of the times when there's pre-season friendly, so I don't get to go as much as I would like to. But I went to see Liverpool play Borussia Dortmund, and managing Borussia Dortmund was Jurgen Klopp.
Oh, really?
That's how long ago it was. But it was just phenomenal to get to go, to be at Anfield, to be outside with all the crowd. Randomly, John Paul from Hollyoaks, the guy who plays him, is a Liverpool fan, and he walked past me. And I knew I'd seen he was a Liverpool fan, and you sort of think, oh, you're never going to see anyone famous or anything there. Yeah. And he literally just walked right past me, and I went, oh, that's a bit like mad, sort of seeing him there. But yeah, it was a great game. It's like a 4-0 win, and just to be there, to be on the cop, to sing "You'll Never Walk Alone" and actually sing it properly, because at the Villa, obviously, they have their own version of it. So yeah, it was absolutely phenomenal to be there and actually see it in person and visit the ground. And I've been to the ground since for like a tour and things like that. But to actually have been for a game there and to soak that atmosphere up in person was absolutely incredible. And I'm hoping I get to do it again.
Did they win the game?
Yes, yeah, it was a 4-0.
There you go.
Daniel Sturridge scored the first one, and he's from Birmingham way as well, so that was quite appropriate.
There you go. I don't go to many football games, but I do love when you enter a football stadium and you first see the pitch, you know, there's just something about it, isn't it? When you've gone to a new stadium and you just go out, you go through that walkway and you just see the pitch in front of you. It's great, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredible. And all the stadiums are so different as well.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah,
realize, you kind of think, oh, they're all going to be the same. But once you get, from the outside, they look different. But when you walk in, they're so different. There's so many different aspects to them, the way they've set them all up. And it's an incredible experience at any of the stadiums, really. But Anfield was really something special, I found.
I get that. I get that. What's next?
It's another one I went to, actually. So, as I said, I am a wrestling fan. I've never been to WrestleMania or anything like that, but I went in 2003 to New York. It's the only time I've ever been to New York, but I went to Madison Square Garden to watch SmackDown being recorded,
Nice.
and
Nice.
I got to see Hulk Hogan live.
And this
And
was 2003, you say, yeah?
2003, yeah, when he made his sort of brief comeback to the WWF, as it was. I always thought I'd never see Hulk Hogan. I'd seen Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'd never seen The Rock, unfortunately. But I'd seen Stone Cold, seen The Undertaker, seen sort of John Cena and a lot of those sort of big names at that time. I had never seen Hulk Hogan, and I thought, I'm never going to get to see Hulk Hogan. And then when me and my friends were going to New York, I just happened to see, oh, SmackDown's going to be at Madison Square Garden. Hulk Hogan's on SmackDown. We could do that. And on our very last night, we actually went to watch the show. So it's me. It was TA who watched wrestling when he was younger, so he knew some of them were. And then two non-fans who were just sitting there going, what's going on? We don't really understand any of this. And the only thing that people will tell you about the end of the show is Hulk Hogan at the end does his pose down stuff for about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I
really?
literally got out of my seat, ran as close to the front as I could, and I'm doing the old Hulk Hogan cup in the ear, posing and all of that sort of stuff. But it was incredible getting to see it in America and getting to see. It was the first time I'd seen them do it as a TV taping as well. I'd always seen like the house shows, as they call them in the UK. So I'd seen a British pay-per-view of sorts, but it was more like a house show than the sort of the big shows that they used to put on. But this was just phenomenal, and so many big names there. Roddy Piper was there at the time as well, and The Undertaker. So yeah, to get to see all those big names in America as well, and at Madison Square Garden, such a legendary arena, it was absolutely incredible to be there. And yeah, my friends always just say it's their memory is there's a guy who was a few rows in front of us, and he was there with his little son, and his little son was trying to get his attention, and the dad's just going, "Quiet, son, I'm trying to watch the Hulk."
That is an experience. Yeah, especially to have seen him and Roddy Piper. I mean, does this mean then we can spot you in a crowd somewhere if we hunt down that episode?
Maybe not that one. We were quite far back, but there are the odd wrestling shows I've been to that I might creep up somewhere or another. I'm sure if you
Wow.
look hard enough.
No, that's really good. Yeah, quite envious of that one actually. Yeah, I'll say that. Yeah. Did you have a third?
No, I did think about talking about the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, but I found I went to so many. Like I didn't get to lots and lots of events, but it was kind of the atmosphere of being there. But I do find, while it was great for the city and great to have that kind of memory of being there and watching some of the things that went on. I mean, we watched basketball semi-finals, the table tennis finals, and the boxing finals as well.
Yeah.
And it was an absolutely phenomenal experience, and something I really enjoyed. But I think for me, it was more about the fact that it had come to my city. I think that was something to
Yeah.
be really proud of, and the way there was a big buzz around things. Um, but I kind of think I want to keep my memory of that in a way, and not have to
Mm.
experience it again, not in a bad way. But I think that's one thing. The other two, I think, are so unique in that they're outside of Birmingham. They're a little bit different. So yeah,
Quite iconic. Yeah.
I didn't want to kind of add a third one where kind of cheating a little bit as well, having three separate events. So I thought, I'll stick to the two.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. All right. So we are now then going to jump right back up to my list. We're going to go to games. And I think I said to you they could be video games or even board games.
Yeah, I am. I am a video gamer. Unfortunately, I'm one of these video gamers that plays FIFA, Call of Duty, and WWE a lot. And I thought I don't really want to reference a lot of those. So I have a couple of board games actually.
Okay.
So the first one is a game called Coup. I don't know if you remember many years ago, there was a YouTube channel that Will Wheaton used to do board games on. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
He had a show called Tabletop, and he would get like Felicia Day and Brandon
Yep.
Routh and various other actors sort of on there playing games. And he did one, and it was like these two micro games, and one was called Love Letter and one was called Coup. And I just remember me and my friends had all started to have a bit of we should do board game nights. We should do like something we can play. And it's that thing as well, isn't it? You'll have some people who like Monopoly, some people who don't, some people who like
Mm.
Cluedo who don't.
Yeah.
I thought we need something a little bit different. And I watched Coup being played by Will Wheaton on Tabletop. I just went, this is perfect. So it's basically a card game where you have different characters that can affect the other players' characters that they have. So you essentially draw two cards, and they are what they call your influence. You then have a turn, you go around the table, and on your turn, you can either take some currency, which you can use once you have enough to coup one of your opponents that you're playing, or you can use the different abilities on your card. So you might have one that's an assassin, and it can take out one of your other players' cards. You have the Contessa that can stop the assassin from taking out one of the
Hmm.
cards. You have the captain, he can steal coins from other players, and you have the ambassador who can stop stealing from other players. So they all have these different roles that are in there, but you don't actually have to have the cards that you say you have. You can bluff them. So, for example, if we were playing, I could say to you, "Well, Dan, I've got an assassin, and I'm going to take one of your cards out," and you could bluff, "Well, I have a Contessa. I can stop you from taking out my card," and I can say, "Okay, I'll take back my entire attempt, and that's it, and we just leave it as it is and go round again." Or I could say, "Well, actually, I don't think you've got a Contessa, and if you haven't, you lose the card you said was that, and then the assassin card takes out the other one."
Right.
And the
Right.
idea is you go around the table just knocking each other out with this mechanic that they've set up, and it's a really really great concept. It ruins friendships. My friends don't trust me anymore with it. The last time we played, I won, and it is the first time I have won in years because I'm usually the first one knocked out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm told I'm not a good bluffer, and that's probably what it is. But yeah, I really love it. It's a quick game as well. You can play like a couple of rounds in a
I
few
think
like 10-minute
that's
things.
important as well, isn't it? If you just want a quick game of something, because I'm
Yes.
just starting this late age to get into board games, and a lot of them seem quite what's the word? Quite apprehensive to want to get into them because of the setup and all the rules set. But something you can just have a quick laugh with friends, right?
Oh yeah, this is probably the one for you then if you check that out. It's
Okay.
such a great
Okay.
game. It's a really good laugh, and obviously it's that thing of the being able to bluff what you have. It just really makes it because most of the time everyone's lying about what they've got anyway.
I can't lie to people. I can't. Yeah, I've not heard of that. Okay. Okay. What was the second one?
So the other one is actually again another superhero thing, and you sort of see the pattern emerging now. There's a game called Legendary, and it's a deck building game, and it's actually cooperative. So rather than it being you're competing against the other players, you're all working together. It can be modified with how you play. So you start every game with a set of shield agents and shield troopers. Shield troopers can fight the villains. Shield agents can recruit better cards into your deck, and you basically get to pick and choose from the Avengers essentially who you want in the game. So Spider Man's in there. He's really easy to recruit. He's got a low recruit number. However, you can get multiple cards of him and chain it together in your hand to help you to do better. You've also got characters like the Hulk or Captain America that are higher value to get into the deck, but a single card from them can do more damage. And it's something I really enjoy playing. But unfortunately, with my friendship group, I'm the big superhero geek, and a couple of my friends like them a bit, but not as much.
Yeah,
So it's hard to get everybody playing it. I've managed to
yeah,
get a 3-player game going. Uh, I want to get you can get 5 people playing it at once, and
right,
I'd
yeah,
love to do that. But that's on Will Wheaton's tabletop as well, and that's sort of how I discovered it. And
okay.
it's just it just combines like board games, which I was getting into, with superheroes, which is something fantastic for me.
Like I said, gaming and superheroes, perfect combination, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. We've just got a handful left of
Okay.
things to do. So the random one I've only just introduced in the last couple of these was food, 1 to 3 food items, and this stems basically because I love food.
Yeah, I've only got the one. It's a bit of a random one as well. There used to be an Indian restaurant by where I live that did something called a chicken tikka rosella. It's kind of like a chicken tikka masala, except it had bell peppers in there. It had little thinly sliced strips of fries on top as well. And it was amazing. It was something I would end up having it every time I went there. And I would always recommend it to people, and they'd go in and they'd say, "Oh my god, I've had that chicken tikka rosella. It's incredible." Unfortunately, after sort of as we were coming out of lockdown, the restaurant actually closed down.
Right.
They'd sort of decided that it wasn't worth staying open after that, and they sort of moved into a takeaway and stopped doing the rosella, unfortunately. Um, but I would love to have another one of those again, and I'd love to forget all about it and get to experience it again for the first time. It's honestly just one of my favorite things I've ever eaten. You know,
Yeah.
when they do on I'm a Celebrity on that last episode, when they get to pick what
Uh,
if I was
yeah,
ever
yeah,
on
yeah.
that show, that would be the thing that I'd be picking. I'd want the chef from the restaurant I used to eat at to make me a chicken tikka rosella.
Oh, sounds so good. Yeah, there's so many instances in my time as well where I go to a place and there's always the one thing. I order the same thing all the time, and I always say to myself, "No, I'm going to order something else the next time I go there." But I order the same thing because I know I love that, and that's what I really want. So I feel you on that one. Yeah. Okay, right. We've got 2 left. So tell you what, let's do gigs or shows. So, like I said, I've mixed up because it could be like theatre shows or what have you.
Yeah, I've got a couple of gigs. The first one is Reading Festival 2012. So it's the only festival, like proper big festival, that I've ever been to where I've camped overnight and been there. And I went because one of my favourite bands, Paramore, were performing there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'd seen them the year before. I'd seen them live in Birmingham, and then their guitarist and their drummer left, and it seemed like they were going to break up. And I thought,
Mm.
oh, I'm never going to get to see them again. And then they went, no, we're gonna do a couple of performances, and I think they released like 3 or 4 little singles just as sort of a thing to tide over. And then they announced they were going to be at Reading Festival, and I thought this could potentially be the last time I ever see them. And
Mm.
I've seen them a couple of times since, to be fair, so they have kept going. Um, but it was just absolutely phenomenal to get to go and sort of experience a festival atmosphere like that, and sort of see one of my favorite bands. As I say, they did a couple of newer tracks that they'd done from the singles that they'd released, but primarily it was just all the hits from the first couple of albums that they'd got. I think they got 3 albums out at the time, so it was just everything from there, really. And to get to see it with that big, large crowd, and randomly, the first time I ever saw them live in Birmingham, they were supported by a band called You Me at Six, and You Me at Six actually were performing on that same stage a bit earlier in the day. So it was just this really cool thing of where the first time I saw them, I'd seen these 2 bands performing, and then I'd seen it sort of again the next time around.
It's funny, isn't it? Because as you're saying that, yeah, Paramore kind of were big recently because they supported Taylor Swift, didn't they?
Yes.
So they were everywhere, all over social media. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm just saying when you were saying that you thought they were going to split up 12 years ago, and here they are now supporting like Taylor Swift.
They've had a couple of lineup changes, but they're still going. There's a couple of them that have been in pretty much every iteration of them, and as long as the lead
Right.
singer's there, that's the key thing,
Yeah.
isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
because that's the voice of the band, really. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Reading as well. Reading Festival. That's a great pick. So Reading 2012. What was your second?
My second one is Natalie Imbruglia, and this is a really strange one. I'd seen her at a sort of party in the park event years and years ago, and then I started just listening to her sort of best of album. Everyone always goes, she only had one album. She's had loads. But I started listening along to it and I was going,
That was real defensive there.
Well, the fact that the people that came with me said she's only got one album, hasn't she, as well? But went along to it and it was an acoustic gig. And she just released an album called Male, where all of the songs were covers of songs done by male vocalists. So she did Friday I'm in Love by The Cure, and
Okay.
there's sort of that kind of stuff that's on there. There's a Damien Rice cover of Cannonball. There's all these songs on there. But she obviously then did some of her back catalogue as well. And it was in this tiny room in Birmingham at a place called The Institute. It wasn't even in their main room. So it was really intimate gig, really not sort of jam-packed full of people. Really great just to hear the songs and to hear them being played. And actually went to see her a couple of years later after that, to be honest, because I just sort of got back into all of her music and all of her songs. And she's actually supporting the Cause later this year, and I'm going to see the Cause. They were
Oh,
the first
really?
band I ever saw live. And my friend who I'm going to see them with, when he asked me about it, because his wife doesn't want to go with him, he said, "Oh yeah, the Cause. Do you want to come?" I went, "Yeah. Natalie Imbruglia is supporting him. I wouldn't mind seeing her again." And I think he was a bit put out that I was a bit more excited about seeing Natalie Imbruglia.
I'm just looking actually. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to be honest. I didn't realize she had that sort of 2018 was the last one, but that she did that many. I mean, for anyone listening who maybe doesn't know, so she made it big, didn't she, in Neighbours, which was a massive Australian soap opera over here. And then she, like a lot of them did, went into music. And I can get why people say that she only did one album. I'm not saying she did, but because that first album was just massive. I think, that was, I don't think it's an understatement to say it was really, really popular. But then I think that because that came off the soap opera straight after that. And it's a shame though that that's all people would have known, because they were riding maybe the coattails of her having left the soap. Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. So what's that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, the male one there, which I like the idea of that. But more recently, I mean, did you see? I mean, this is a guilty pleasure of mine, but she was in The Masked Singer and she won that.
Did you see her on that? I did see that. That was just before I went to see her a couple of years ago as well.
Yeah.
She just won it, and yeah, it's really interesting because I think with singers, unless you're really into them and you kind of just buy everything they do, you'll have someone who has. It's kind of like Alanis Morissette, isn't it? Everyone knows Jagged Little Pill, and everyone knows the songs off that, but do they know everything else that she's done? And I kind of feel like Natalie Imbruglia is a bit like that. Left to the Middle's this iconic album that everyone knew, and obviously Torn coming from that album. But then if you weren't listening to it, apart from knowing that from being in the mainstream, you wouldn't know that she'd released all these other albums. But she was absolutely fantastic live. Great voice. And I think, yeah, she's someone who, if she ever sort of comes around to Birmingham, I try and go and see her live when I can.
Yeah, I think, this was probably, well, it was the first album anyway, pre-streaming, right? So you'd hear the single, you'd go out and buy the album, but if you didn't buy the album, you wouldn't really hear the rest of it. Now everything is available online, right? Yeah, I remember getting the first album as well. So yeah, I was there, and I think it was, Torn was just such a great single, wasn't it? Such a great single, and it was everywhere for I can't remember when it was released, but when the single itself, whether it was summer or whatever, it was on all the radio stations, wasn't it? All the TV, those TV lifestyle shows. It was everywhere.
It was so different to everything else as well that was coming out of the sort of the soap opera stars going into music. It was so different to everything else.
Yeah.
Everything else was so sort of poppy. And this, it was still pop, but it had a little bit of rock and indie influence in there a little bit as well. And
that's exactly the rock and indie. Yeah.
I think that's what did it with her, and why she was a little bit more different audience to sort of your Kylie and Jason Donovans who'd preceded her and people like that.
Well, that was it. Kylie and Jason and Stephen Dennis for a little bit.
Of course, yeah.
So yeah, and like I said, it was yeah, don't want to be unfair because obviously Kylie, as she went on to have a massive career, but the early years of their music, it was like you said, it was very poppy, very manufactured. Whereas, yeah, Natalie Imbruglia's, especially Torn, it just felt a bit gritty, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was, as I say, so different to anything else, particularly sort of from a female soap opera
Mm,
actress coming into music. It was not the kind of thing you'd have expected it to be.
yeah, wow, yeah, I wasn't expecting that to feature on the list.
I'm very random.
No, I love it. I love it. Okay, we are now then on the. Oh, sorry, was that it for your shows? Yeah, yeah.
That's it.
So we are on to the final category. Now, I call this life events, and I always make sure I say to people, you don't have to get too personal. And if you don't want to, you don't have to say like a birth of a kid or marriage or this or that. But it's just anything that's, yeah, it's something that's happened in your life that you say, do you know what? I'd love to go back and have that again.
So I have two. The first one is my nephew being born. I don't have any kids myself. My nephew was born 2017, and he's absolutely fantastic. My brother and I are both very similar in our tastes and things, and we were actually told by our parents, we don't want him ending up like you, pair, and being obsessed with superheroes as he grows up and all of this. We don't go getting him any of that sort of stuff. And then our parents went and bought him loads of superhero stuff, and he's
Oh, really?
unfortunately ended up just like us. Uh, but yeah, I mean, him being. I remember a friend of mine years and years ago, like when his sister had a baby, and I said, "Oh, like what's it like being an uncle?" And he said, "I think unless you have your own kids, it's probably the best thing that can sort of happen." And I sort of completely agree. I just completely agree with it. I just remember going to see him when he was born and sort of holding him for the first time and just thinking, wow, this is my nephew. This is this child that I, can sort of have a hand in raising a little bit and sort of, unfortunately turning him into a massive superhero
Yeah,
geek like me.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, it was a great sort of time. And obviously he's my only nephew, so I've not got to experience any of that since. So
Mm, mm.
it'd be something amazing to go back and experience, and maybe listen to my parents a bit more and not try and get him as much into the comic books and the other stuff.
It's gonna happen. It'll find a way. No, that's a really cool one. That's a really cool one. And yeah, what's your second?
So my last one, this is kind of showing a little bit of sadness and a little bit of geekery for me. So I used to always go to a lot of comic book signings, and like,
Okay.
there'd be actors from different shows and things like that.
Yeah.
And I actually went in 2020, just before the lockdowns, just before we knew what was going on with COVID, and we knew kind of all of the risks of it and everything that was going on. I went to Comic Con Liverpool. And the reason that I went to Comic Con Liverpool was when I was 11, I had a massive crush on Melissa Joan Hart, who at the time was in Clarissa Explains It All. And she had said on her Instagram she was going to be in Liverpool. And I went, oh my God, I can meet Melissa Joan Hart. I'd never thought I'd ever get the chance to meet her. Oh, that'd be amazing. Then they added Peter Cullen, who is the voice of Optimus Prime, who is my favourite animated character of all time. And I just thought, I can meet Melissa Joan Hart and Peter Cullen at the same event. That's incredible. So I went to that, and actually a couple of my friends have birthdays quite early in the year, and they tend to combine their sort of birthday gathering and stuff. And so they'd found something in Birmingham, and I couldn't go because I was going to this Comic Con. So I got on the train. I'm, as I say, a Liverpool fan, so I'm on this train going to Liverpool. I'm the only person on the train with Liverpool clothing on who's not going to the game that was on that day. And I remember just going, and it was really strange because obviously COVID was coming into effect. A lot of people, no one really, it wasn't even called COVID then. It was still
Mm, mm.
coronavirus. It was referred to. It was something that was very in the early stages of being discussed. And I just remember you'd hear little whisperings from people. There were little kids at the convention who were literally running up to people, just going coronavirus, and you're kind of going, oh yeah. And then of course, given what we know, it turned into obviously the global lockdown. But I went along and met Melissa, got a signed photograph of her, and I got I got a painting of Optimus Prime signed by Peter Cullen. The girl I used to work with had painted for me a few years before, and I remember taking a photograph of it and sending it to her and saying, "I'm really sorry, somebody scribbled all over this painting you did me." And then she's like texting back, "What? What?" And I went, "Luckily, it's the guy who did the voice of him." And she said, "I can't believe that's the thing that you got signed by him." And I said, "Well, it's a
That's
one of a kind
brilliant.
thing. No one else is going to have that." And then obviously met Melissa Joan Hart, which was something. I'd followed her career. Well, as I say, since I was 11, I'd seen her in Melissa and Joey quite recently, and a few other projects, some good, some bad. She does a lot of Christmas movies nowadays. That are a bit hit and miss.
Yeah.
But I met her, and actually, because my friends had all gone out when I came back, I only saw TA. I didn't see the rest of my mates because obviously we went into this lockdown. I didn't see them for like nearly 2 years, apart from sort of meeting up in a park and sort of having a chat. So the next time I saw them was actually my 40th. And for my 40th, they bought me a cameo from Melissa Joan Hart.
Oh, really?
And obviously, I'd had a few drinks beforehand, and I kind of jokingly said it, thinking they'd never do it, and they did it. And I just burst into tears and just looked like a complete fool because I did not expect it at all.
Oh, that's brilliant. You still got it, yeah?
I have still got it, yes. Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Do you know the funny thing is, at the time of recording, last night I was talking to Joey of the Game Club pod, and I was saying there was a period of about 4 or 5 years, so about 2015 to 2020, when I just got the Comic-Con bug. I went to loads of them, predominantly London, but I was always looking at the Liverpool one because the Liverpool one always seemed to get some really, really good guests. And it's just funny, we were talking about that. I love the Comic-Con, I tell you. It's just, it's a good vibe, good fun place to be.
Oh, they're brilliant. Yeah, I've met some really cool people over the years at them, and I like going for the autographs more so. I know a lot of people go for the cosplay and sort
Yeah,
of
yeah,
collecting memorabilia and stuff, and that's all phenomenal as well. But
yeah.
I would not be able to make the costumes the cosplayers make. I would not
No,
look very good in
phenomenal, isn't
those.
it? And just because you said it is funny when you get to kind of like quote meet someone that you really wanted to, or you've watched TV. Like for me, one of them I had a picture with Lou Ferrigno, so the original Hulk, right?
That is my brother's hero.
Is it? Yeah, it was just incredible. And the funny thing was, he was there. I can't remember the guy's name at the same time as the guy who played Flash Gordon.
Oh, okay, Sam Jones.
So
Yeah,
he was there. He was there as well. But yeah, so as soon as I saw Lou Ferrigno was there, I signed up straight away for that because I thought I grew up being terrified of him. I'll be honest with you. But yeah, there's just something about it that makes you regress like
he
30 years, isn't there?
Lou Ferrigno actually made me and my brother cry, but in a good way when we met him.
Oh really?
So my brother, The Incredible Hulk, is his favorite TV show of all time, the Lou Ferrigno version. He'd
Yeah.
met him a couple of times, and he used to email him via his website, and like he got a poster of the Incredible Hulk movie, you know, the Edward Norton one, because Lou Ferrigno did the
Yes.
voice of the
Yeah.
Hulk in it, and he took it to him and he got it signed, and he used to do a website on the Hulk and all this stuff, and we were kind of going, you're not really emailing him, it's just somebody who works for him doing all this. And my brother's there, and Lou Ferrigno just looks up at him and just goes, "I want to thank you for being a fan of me and the Incredible Hulk." And he just starts talking to him and like, "Thank you for sending me these emails and for
Wow.
keeping the Hulk alive."
Wow.
And me and my brother just walked away, and I'm there crying, going, "I cannot believe this. This is
Yeah.
amazing!" Like my brother's heroes just give it, and I wish I'd videoed it because he
Yeah.
just had this really lovely
Oh
moment with him,
wow.
and yeah,
Yeah.
they are fantastic, aren't they? The Comic Con events. So
Yeah.
we started going a while back and stopped since my brother had his son, but they are fantastic and a chance to meet people you'd never think you'd get to
Yeah.
interact with
Yeah.
otherwise.
Well, look, that's it. You've been mind wiped. Hopefully, it wasn't too traumatic.
No, it's been fantastic. Thank you for letting me reminisce a little bit.
No, I've made a note of everything as we've gone along because I found it helps me when I come to put it out. I'm just looking down this list. That is an eclectic list.
I am very random, as I said.
I mean that in a good way. Look, it's thank you for coming on. Thank you for opening up. I always think it's a great one for me to meet new podcasters, but I'm always quite wary that it is actually getting you to open up a bit about yourself. So no, it's fascinating to talk about it. So I do want to get you back at some point for a dinner party episode. I don't know if you've caught any of those, but I think that's
Have
another
done,
fun
yeah.
one.
That'd be fantastic, yeah.
Before you go, thank you massively from me. Again, just tell everyone about your podcast and where they can hear you.
So it's the Middle-aged Bodcast. We're available on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts, and a few other platforms out there. Two blokes in their 40s from Birmingham, just trying to get healthier, trying to get fitter, trying to learn to cook, do a bit of DIY, and just lots of self-improvement, really. And you can find us on our website, middleagedbodcast.co.uk. And we're also... I'm sure Daniel put the sort of some links in the notes and stuff, but yeah, it would be fantastic if people want to give us a listen. Brilliant. Hopefully with something people will enjoy.
Absolutely. Show them some support. And from me, you're listening to me, so you know where to find me, but you can get me on the social media. Just look for Casting Views. If you fancy doing this, you've heard Rich do this now. So if you fancy a go at this, drop me a note, and yeah, we'll get you on and wipe your mind as well. I'll see you next time for another episode of Casting Views.
2, 3, 4. If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, check what